Welcome to Growth Matters Podcast. My name is Justice. We talk about business, technology, and personal growth and development. So enjoy, sit back, and relax. The Growth Matters Podcast covers many elements, such as how we can grow in our faith, family, finances, and friendships. In addition, we touch upon current events and topics. Today's episode is talking about the Supreme Judicial Court Clerk's Office for Suffolk County. The Clerk's Office for County of Suffolk is primarily responsible for the single justice caseload of Supreme Judicial Court, administrative and disciplinary matters filed by the Board of Bar Overseers affecting members of the bar and matters relating to bar admission and the practice of law in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have in the studio with us Allison Cartwright, Esquire, and candidate for the Supreme Judicial Court for Suffolk County. Allison Cartwright, Esquire, is a lawyer, mom, mentor, and Hyde Park resident. She works tirelessly over 30 years to advocate for everyone from children to adults, immigrants, citizens, people in recovery, anyone who has ever needed a second chance. She believes in the judicial system that is fair, open, and equitable. It's critical to preserving fundamental constitutional and human rights. Welcome to the Growth Matters Podcast. Please share a little bit about yourself to our listening audience. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate your taking the time to speak with me and to help educate people on what this clerk's office does and why I am the best candidate for this clerk's position. I'm Allison Cartwright. I'm a lawyer. I'm a mother. I am a resident of Boston. And this position is for it's elected by the people of Suffolk County, which is Boston, Chelsea, Winthrop, and Revere. Mm-hmm. And I have over 32 years of experience practicing law in the Commonwealth. I have represented clients in many different courts and courthouses in the Commonwealth from, of course, Boston, but also I have had cases as far west as Springfield, as north as Haverhill, the Cape. I've had matters on Martha's Vineyard. So I am very well versed in how courthouses run. Okay. And the role of the clerk. And I bring all of that wealth of experience to this position. As I said, it's been 32 years of representing clients in district court and superior court, juvenile court, family and probate court. Okay. Oh, quite a bit. He brought breadth of experience there from various types of court settings, I see. Yes. I began my career with the Public Defender's Office, representing clients who cannot afford to hire an attorney. And from there, I did work briefly with the city of Boston, and then I opened up a small law firm with a law school classmate. And whether I was in private practice or working for the Public Defender's Office, I have always represented indigent clients. So as a private practitioner, I would do what's called bar advocate work. Okay. That's where private attorneys accept court-appointed cases. So I did that when I had my small law firm, and then later when I just had my solo law firm. So I have never strayed from my mission of representing people who are most vulnerable, who cannot afford to hire an attorney, but yet need excellent legal representation. So that's what I pride myself on. Oh, great. Glad to hear that. Could you please share a little bit about the responsibilities of the clerk of the Supreme Judicial Court? Because this just seems like a position that many people do not know about. Could you share a little bit what it does and just talk about that position a little bit? Of course, I'd be happy to. The clerk for the Supreme Judicial Court for Suffolk County has many responsibilities. Among them, swearing in new attorneys to the bar. And this is done many times throughout the year. There is the bigger ceremony that typically takes place in December for the people who took the July bar and passed it. It's welcoming them into the profession. This is a profession that has a lot of rules, ethics that attorneys must abide by. And as someone who has been a member of the bar for 32 years, I understand the experience that one must go to in order to get to that point of being sworn in. You have to complete your undergraduate studies. You have to go to law school, complete law school.
Okay.
And then you have to sit for the bar exam, which is a 2-day comprehensive exam that covers well over a dozen subject areas in the law. So it's quite extensive, and it's quite an honor to join the profession and to be among other attorneys. And as the clerk for the Supreme Judicial Court for Suffolk County, that's an awesome responsibility. It's also it's a fun time too to celebrate with new attorneys, their families, their friends who help them get to that point. This clerk is also responsible if attorneys mess up and they have to face disciplinary action. This clerk has to work with the Office of Bar Counsel and the justices of the Supreme Judicial Court to assemble that record to help conduct those hearings. And then the clerk is responsible for announcing the punishment, if any, for whatever infractions the attorney may have committed, up to and including disbarment.
Okay. Wow.
And among sort of the daily functions of this clerk's office is running the single justice session. This is an emergency appeals session that attorneys utilize when they are in the middle of a trial or a significant evidentiary hearing. And they believe that the sitting judge ruled in their favor and that it's a serious error of constitutional proportions. They may file this petition. And what's really serious about it is if they file this petition, the proceedings have to stop. And this clerk must assemble that record. So that's getting the petition, the motions from the petitioner as well as the respondent, any other evidence that's going to be used to be heard by a single justice. And then it's given to that justice to make that decision. And then this clerk has to get that decision, disseminate that decision to the parties and now to the public. We're working hard on the technology to be able to publish those decisions in as close to real time as we can.
Wow.
So it's a very significant experience, and it deserves to have a clerk who is an attorney at the helm. And that's important because the clerk is the person who has to stand accountable for what happens out of that office and not rely simply on perhaps hiring attorneys on staff, which there are attorneys on staff in the clerk's office. But ultimately, it's the clerk who has to stand to the public, to the justices, and be held accountable for the work that comes out of that office.
Wow. So it sounds like there's 3 departments under the Supreme Judicial Court, like the Attorney Services, the Supreme Judicial Court Single Justice, and the Bar Docket. So there's a lot of things you're overseeing there in those 3 groups, if I kind of understood you from your explanation.
Sure, and those are just sort of like the top 3 things. There
are
other things, but
please elaborate
exactly,
on.
Well, no, that's exactly it. I mean, this clerk may have to swear in others, other positions throughout state government. So this clerk does have that type of authority to do that.
Mm-hmm.
This clerk also serves as the bridge between the public and the justices.
Okay.
And just so it's clear to everyone, the clerk is the lifeblood of any court. The business of the court cannot get done without the clerk and the clerk's office.
Okay.
So having administrative experience, knowing how courts operate is important. And this is our state's highest court. So let's always keep that in mind. So it's not a lot of on-the-job training. I'll learn as I go. No. We need a clerk to come in, hit the ground running, keep the court running, our state's highest court.
So in doing that, so you're dealing with, I'm guessing you would deal with the governors at some points from their requests, the governor's council and other folks that's coming through. I mean, could you kind of talk a little bit about that? I mean, is that part of the clerk's position, responsibility, connecting with some other people and making sure things run smooth administratively? Or
Well, anyone who has any dealings with what this clerk's office does, yes, comes to this clerk's office. And as I said, this clerk's office is the bridge. So if there are things that need to be before the justices, it has to come through this clerk's office, or alternatively through the other clerk that serves the SJC, and that clerk is called the clerk, the SJC clerk for the Commonwealth. And that clerk handles what we would call the regular docket for the clerk. Because typically, if you want to file an appeal, it would have to go through that clerk's office. And sometimes appeals can take a lot of time, years even. But the clerk position I'm running for, the clerk for Suffolk County, does handle those emergency petitions. And there's a lot of urgency in that. And you must be able to work efficiently to handle the single justice docket.
Okay. Now, what's involved in some of those petitions that you would have to make sure that single justice system that you're covering is paying a lot of attention to detail, I would think.
Absolutely. You really must pay attention to detail. You must make sure that the matter is properly before the court, that it meets, the criteria. But also, let me give you an example of a more recent one that perhaps our listeners would be interested in.
Definitely.
I'm sure a lot of people are following the Karen Reed trial that's taking place in Norfolk Superior Court. Well, at one point, the prosecutor filed a motion for a buffer zone regarding the protesters outside of the courthouse. Now, Karen Reed and her attorneys took no position on that. However, the protesters hired their own counsel, and they filed an emergency petition against the buffer zone that Judge Cannoni had allowed. So that had to go through the single justice session. And it had to move very quickly because, this is a trial that, and as with almost any trial, if you're going to have to pause the proceedings, that's not something you want to do. We want justice to move, fairly quickly. So that had to go up to the single justice session, and it had to, all of the paperwork and the filings had to be in good order. And then it went in front of a single justice. And the single justice did rule that the buffer zone was, properly in place. And that's the buffer zone is there to protect, for example, witnesses coming and going into the courthouse, other court personnel, the parties themselves. So that's just a recent example of how that session had to handle an emergency petition and had to do it quickly, efficiently, so that the proceedings could go forward.
Okay. Wow. Thank you for sharing that, because that really brings some light to how important this position is, because I guess the current clerk of the Supreme Judicial Court is a lawyer, and she's not running for re-election, because I see that the primary is coming up September 3rd, and this is also a 6-year term that you're seeking. And so when you mentioned that, it's definitely important that the Supreme Judicial Court clerk be an attorney, that because you understand all the proceedings and the language that goes involved into it. I mean, being someone that's not involved, not an attorney, would you understand the language and what goes into the dockets? Could you kind of elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. The clerk should know the language, the legalese, as we call it. And that helps with the work in doing the business of the clerk's office, understanding rules, procedures. It all matters. And
Okay.
it matters that the clerk understands this. And again, does not have to rely on staff. It's more than just a purely administrative type of a role. You really need to have a deep appreciation for law and how our court systems work. And as I stated earlier, I've been in and out of many different courthouses. I have dealt with the clerks in their offices, my goodness, thousands of times.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the work gets done in a courthouse. So understanding that, and understanding the fact that for the past nearly 30 years, the clerk for the Supreme Judicial Court for Suffolk County has been an attorney. And some of the things that she has done have helped to improve upon the services and the business of the court. For example, increasing the technology, allowing attorneys to what we call e-file their paperwork and motions. It's incredible. And it advances access to the courts.
Okay.
Because some of the top things that I would prioritize: fairness, equity, and accessibility to the court. And that's clearly important now more than ever when we see our democracy is at a critical juncture.
Mm-hmm.
And our courts must remain independent and be able to carry out their function. And in order to do that, you need a very strong professional clerk's office.
Mm-hmm. Because it seems like you really don't have a lot of time to be consulting many people if you need to make a decision that needs to be a suppressing decision at that particular moment. You need to understand, as you said, the legalese and those things, and make those decisions, with some sound judgment.
Right. And, you're serving many different interests, if you will. You are serving the justices.
Okay.
And, these are the top brilliant legal minds in our state. So you need to serve them. You also need to serve the public, and you need to be able to manage your staff. And I have experience in all of those areas. The staff I'm responsible for 75 people plus or minus. That
okay.
includes attorneys, investigators, social service advocates, administrative support staff, interns, anyone who works in any of the offices that I manage. I'm responsible for them. And this clerk's office has 15 staff people, including the clerk. So I have experience, as I said, managing staff.
Okay.
I have experience, as a trial attorney, knowing how to put together a trial that may have many pieces, working on a team, having, investigators assisting social service advocates, doing all the wraparound services. And I do love to promote CPCS because it is an incredible organization, and we represent our clients in a holistic manner. We look at the entire client. And that's what I will bring with me as a clerk for the Supreme Judicial Court for Suffolk County.
Well, that's a good lead into my next question. Why do you want to be the judicial clerk?
It's when I found out that the position was available, it was something I felt needed to have someone like me at the helm, someone who could bring all of these different experiences to that role. And I'm also a huge proponent of people, and I tell this when I speak to students, and I also help train and teach law students at Harvard Law School in their trial advocacy workshop. I even talk to kindergartners. But one of the things that I'd like to impress upon people is you should always avail yourself of opportunities where you can grow or you can offer growth to others. And I just see this as a natural progression. And I think, again, I'm the most qualified person in this race to be the next clerk of the Supreme Judicial Court. And so those are some of the reasons I want to do it. I just want to advance justice. And as I said, I have been practicing law for a long time, 3 decades.
Yeah.
And this is just another way of me giving back to my profession.
Could you share some of the platforms and goals you have as being the clerk of the Supreme Judicial Court?
Some of the goals that I would have, number one, I do definitely want to increase the accessibility. I know that there are language barriers going on in courts throughout the Commonwealth. In fact, we often find that cases have to be continued or proceedings can't go forward because we don't have enough interpreters and things like that. I would work very hard with the justices to try to address this problem and to ensure that there is accessibility, whether it be language, disability. I would also work to improve, as I had said earlier, the technology of the court. It is time for us to really get fully into the 21st century. We do need to have more technological, take advantage of the technology that's available to us.
Okay.
There's no reason why we should not do that. And there are many courthouses in this Commonwealth today that don't have Wi-Fi service. I know. I have been in those courts. I have tried to access that, and you find yourself up in a corner somewhere holding your phone up in the air hoping to get a signal.
Okay.
So things like that I would absolutely work on. I would also I would like to try to extend opportunities, work opportunities to returning citizens. I would like to hire, whether as interns and paid interns. I believe that anyone who's working should be compensated for their work. And what we also find is if we don't pay interns, then we're only going to get interns who come from backgrounds where they can afford to work for free. As a law student, I could not work a free internship. I had to have a paid internship to be able to, take care of myself. So I would work on having returning citizens be able to have that type of experience, and it would help to integrate them even more into society, give them even better job opportunities. So I would definitely do that, whether it be for a permanent position or most certainly internship opportunities that could springboard to something more.
Okay.
That's something I care deeply about.
Yeah, and when you mentioned about the accessibility, and when you talk about the Wi-Fi, some of the older buildings, I was thinking the accessibility for people that are mobily impaired.
Oh, yes.
How do we improve some of those courthouses to get access ramps and whatever?
Most courthouses do have handicap accessibility. So I think we're probably good there, but
Okay.
in terms of other accessibility, I look at language accessibility. That is a big problem now in the courts where we don't have enough interpreters.
Okay.
And when we don't have the proper interpreter, then the matters have to be postponed, continued. And this constant kicking the can down the road is essentially, as Thurgood Marshall said, justice delayed is justice denied, and that's what we can have happening at this point. So we really do need to put more emphasis and energy into solving that problem of lack of court interpreters, because anyone who comes in front of a courthouse should be able to be heard and listened to and understood. So that's a main focus when I'm talking about accessibility is making everything accessible to all who may come before the court.
That's a good point, what you mentioned, because justice delayed is justice denied. And that could be a couple of days, 2 or 3 days until you get an interpreter, I guess.
And sometimes it's months because in
Wow.
looking at district courts, they do a huge volume of cases. And when you have to put a case over, sometimes the next available date could be months away. So this is a serious problem that, and I'm sure the state's highest court is looking into this and doing what it can. And as the clerk, I would do whatever I could, what I could bring my experience to, help in solving that problem.
Wow, that's a very good point. That's a very good point. Could you please share with our listening audience why are you the best candidate for this position?
Well, I'm the best candidate for this position for a number of reasons. I think without even getting to the fact that my opponent has no legal background and I am the only attorney in this race,
Okay.
what I bring with me is 30 plus years of being an attorney, of understanding the court system, how it works, the role of the clerk at every level in our judicial system here in Massachusetts. I understand that role. And this role here is serving our state's highest court. So that's an added bonus to bring to this position, is understanding that the court systems and what this role really entails. Being able to manage the staff. Currently, there are, in addition to the clerk, there are 3 attorneys on staff.
Okay.
The clerk is the leader of this court. The clerk needs to understand, in order to lead these attorneys and to talk with them about various aspects of the job and cases that are coming into the court. As clerk, I can talk to the assistants underneath who are working on, again, making sure the business of the court takes place. I wouldn't have to rely entirely on staff attorneys to tell me what's happening. I would know what's happening. And that, to me, leadership flows from the top down. And that's what I would bring. In addition to, my legal experience, my managerial experience, those are 2 critical elements that the SJC looks for in a clerk. When Maura Doyle was first in this position, she was appointed because her predecessor had stepped down. And for that reason, and it was an elected position, but because he stepped down before his term expired, the SJC justices got to appoint someone. They appointed an attorney. Maura Doyle had been in practice for many, many years before she became clerk of the SJC for Suffolk County.
Okay. All right.
And more recently, the counterpart clerk for the SJC for the Commonwealth moved on. He got a judgeship, and his position became open. So what did the justices who get to appoint that's a 5-year appointed position. When they posted for that position, minimum qualifications were that the candidate have at least 10 years as a practicing attorney and member in good standing of the bar, and that the person have progressive managerial experience. And again, I have all of those things. I have 30 years as a member of the bar. I have years of experience, starting when I was a bar advocate and was a supervising attorney for attorneys in the Suffolk Lawyers for Justice Incorporated, and I had to do a myriad of responsibilities, including conducting performance evaluations and things of that nature. At the time, that organization had 400 attorneys underneath it.
That's quite a bit.
Then I was hired back to CPCS to head the Roxbury Defenders. Again, I had a staff of 25 plus attorneys, investigators, social service advocates, administrative support. And now as managing director, my staff has increased and so have my responsibilities. Not only do I manage offices in Suffolk and Norfolk counties, but I also help CPCS in formulating and implementing policies. I tell people the crux of my job is to ensure that staff who work in my area and in my division have the tools necessary to do their job. And part of having those tools is ensuring that they have the proper training. I work with hiring, and the Public Defender Division is the biggest division in the agency. So that's always very important to make sure you're hiring people who are passionate about the work and are able to do the work. And we also focus on diversity because we serve a diversified clientele. So we need diversity within our own ranks. So those are the things that I would bring as clerk for the SJC in Suffolk County.
Wow, that's quite a bit. That's good. That's good. Do you want to share anything else before we conclude this episode on today?
Yes, I would ask your listeners to please vote for me on September 3rd. That's the Democratic primary. And there are only 2 people right now, me and my opponent, who are running for this position. There is no Republican opponent. So this race on the 3rd is very critical to the one name that gets put on the ballot in November. And I want that name to be Allison Cartwright. And I thank you so much for having me here and being able to speak to your listeners and let them know how important this clerk position is and why they should come out and vote. And I remind people September 3rd is the day after Labor Day. If you're going to be out of town or have other plans, please do early voting or mail-in voting because your voice should always count.
Great. Again, thank you for being our guest on Growth Matters podcast and for sharing about the Supreme Judicial Court for the Suffolk County. It's a great opportunity to listen to you today and understand more about this position because it's a 6-year term, and many people, I think, within the Commonwealth and in Suffolk County specifically probably do not know about this position. But so thank you so much for bringing that breadth and wealth of knowledge about this position and your experience. Thank you for listening to the Growth Matters podcast. You know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, and share with the broader community. Until the next time, stay focused, prepare, execute, and celebrate the victories as you continue to grow and develop in every area of your life. I will see you at the next one. Peace. I am your host, Justice.